William Shakespeare. Many know him as the greatest poet and playwright of his time, even of any time. He invented more than 1,000 words that are still commonly used. His plays have a view of the human psyche that was not echoed by many of his contemporaries. His quotes are heard every day. "We are such stuff as dreams are made on. A plague on both your houses. Sweets to the sweet. The play's the thing. Parting is such sweet sorrow. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it." He wrote for 22 years, authoring 37 plays alone. What drove this theater to be so lively? What gave him inspiration for his plays? The answer is this: his environment. Whether it was his own life or the goings-on around him, he always put what he saw into his plays. The major events around him were always echoed by what he was writing. They may have even been a sort of diary for him to express his thoughts about what he was seeing. During this video, I will look at two of Shakespeare's most famous plays, Romeo and Juliet and The Tempest, in context of the times, along with two of the most hotly debated characters in Shakespeare's life, his patron the Earl of Southampton, and his young son Hamnet, to show the effect of Shakespeare's life on his works. Romeo and Juliet is one of Shakespeare's earliest plays. Written in 1594 to 1595, England was comparable to 14th century Italy, so Shakespeare drew on what was around him for the setting. Both regions had recently gone through wars and religious struggles. Italy, while the schism had happened a long time ago, still suffered from religious conflict over Eastern Orthodox Christianity. England struggled through the Anglican-Catholic division and Bloody Mary's reign, just before Shakespeare wrote the play. Also, the plague had hit both places recently, Italy in 1348, England in a large outbreak in 1592, and for many years after, in smaller epidemics. In Romeo and Juliet, the two feuding families eventually make up at the end. However, in Shakespeare's time, there were two major feuds that did not end well. The first one is well known, although perhaps not by this name. The Stuart-Tudor feud is mostly known by the two major players, Queen Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots. Queen Elizabeth saw Mary Queen of Scots as a rival for the throne, and eventually had her imprisoned and executed. The less widely publicized feud is the Danvers-Long feud, in which the two Danvers brothers killed Henry Long over a small matter and eventually had to flee. Shakespeare's patron sheltered them, so it is feasible that Shakespeare would have heard of this. Since commenting on politics in plays was forbidden, and sometimes even punishable by death in Shakespeare's time, he used the feuding families in his plays to add commentary on the political situation at the time. The death of the future of the two families was what he was sure was happening to the rest of England. The families' futures were disappearing into war. The Tempest is one of Shakespeare's last plays. Written in 1611, King James had just taken the throne and agreed to sponsor Shakespeare's company, now called The King's Men. It is remarkable in the fact that it is one of only two of Shakespeare's plays that is entirely original, the other being Love's Labour's Lost. It is Shakespeare's last play written alone. Even though this had a completely original plot, it does still take elements from current literature. Near the time of the play's writing, there was a near shipwreck off the coast of Bermuda. One of the survivors wrote a book about it when he returned to England, and it is very likely that Shakespeare read the book. The shipwreck of Alonso and the court was most likely based on that. Also, no matter what else was on his mind, one of the most prevalent topics in England was the colonial project. Most characters at one point or another talk about how they would rule the island if they were king. Gonzalo imagines a utopia. Drunken Stefano creates his own paradise. Prospero, of course, does rule the island. Like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve, and, like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. This is Prospero's famous cloud-capped towers speech. As Shakespeare's theatre was called the Globe Theatre, this is often called Shakespeare's goodbye to theatre. Indeed, this was his last play written alone, although he did go on to co-author two more plays, The Two Noble Kinsmen and Henry VIII. Sadly, this line proved to be prophetic, as it was a performance of Henry VIII that caused Shakespeare's retirement. The thatch caught when a cannon fired, and the Globe Theatre burnt down in 1613. The third Earl of Southampton, Henry Wriothesley, was one of Shakespeare's patrons. Shakespeare's company was named the Lord Chamberlain's Men after their main patron, but Shakespeare had his own patron. The Earl of Southampton has been one of the most controversial figures in Shakespeare's life. Many historians now believe that, not only did he fund many of Shakespeare's endeavors, he was also the young man written about in the sonnets, and possibly even Shakespeare's lover. Shakespeare's early sonnets were written about and possibly for a young man, and it is speculated that both men were bisexual. Shakespeare had possibly spent a good amount of time at the estate of the Earl during the theatre closure due to plague in the years 1593 to 1594. Also, there is some indication in his dedications of his long poems, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece, a familiarity that grew in between the writings of the poems. Right Honourable, I know not how I shall offend in dedicating my unpolished lines to your lordship, nor how the world will censure me for choosing so strong a prop to support so weak a burthen. The love I dedicate to your lordship is without end, whereof this pamphlet, without beginning, is but a superfluous moiety. The dedication of The Rape of Lucrece is very familiar in comparison to the formality of the dedication of Venus and Adonis. Then again, most of the historians give only passing thought to this relationship, as Southampton was involved in the Essex Rebellion. The Earl was imprisoned, and he and Shakespeare had no further contact. Shakespeare had 3 children. He married his wife, Anne Hathaway, when he was only 18, and his first daughter was born shortly afterwards. Susanna Shakespeare was closely followed by the twins Judith and Hamnet. They were named after their godparents, Judith and Hamnet Sadler. Hamnet Shakespeare unfortunately died at the age of 11 in 1596. Soon after, Shakespeare moved to the Globe. He wrote some of his best history plays directly after moving. First Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, then Henry V, then lastly Julius Caesar. All of these plays include an element of betrayal, and often a younger man in them. Shakespeare would have felt betrayed when his son died so young, and would have liked to spend more time with him, so he did by putting him in his plays. Henry, Prince of Wales, and Henry IV in particular can be seen as childish, falling into the company of the thieves. After the 3 history plays, Shakespeare wrote his famous play Hamlet. This does sound greatly like Hamnet, and indeed it was an alternate spelling of the same name. In Shakespeare's will, Hamnet Sadler, whom Hamnet Shakespeare was named for, was called Hamlet. The character of Hamlet himself bears some resemblance to a young boy, slightly whiny, and given to fits of temper. Shakespeare brought some traits that an 11-year-old boy would have and gave them to the character that he wrote for his son. Shakespeare's life was a fertile ground for imagination to grow, whether it was through the politics of the times or events in his own life. He only ever wrote 2 plays with original plots, and yet he is still a playwright that can be heard through the years. Perhaps it is because he used everyday inspirations and really looked at the people around him that we can still hear his voice. Suffice it to say that those who do not like Shakespeare do not like it only because the language is so hard to understand, and those who understand it laugh. When that I was and a little tiny boy, with the hay-ho, the wind and the rain, a foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came to man's estate, with the hay-ho, the wind and the rain, 'gainst knaves and thieves men shut their gate, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came, alas, to wive, with the hay-ho, the wind and the rain, by swaggering could I never thrive, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came unto my bed for the hay-ho, the wind and the rain with tosspots still had drunken heads, for the rain it raineth every day. A great while ago the world begun with the hay-ho, the wind and the rain. But that's all on, our play is done, and we'll strive to please you every day.